Tucker Carlson tonight. Here's an interesting observation slash theory. The slogans they yell the loudest are the ones they believe the least. We've been noticing that recently. Volume is inversely proportional to sincerity. Maybe you scream it because you don't really believe it. Why do we think this? Well, here's why. The very same people who've told us for decades now that it's my body, my choice, and seemed to mean it when they said it, those same people abandoned their own argument immediately when COVID arrived. Suddenly, on a dime, they turned and they were demanding that we wear the mask and get the shot. But these were not optional suggestions. They weren't deeply personal decisions to be made according to the dictates of individual conscience after consulting with family, physicians, and clergy. They weren't between you, your doctor, and God. No, not at all. These were mandates. All of a sudden, Democrats were arguing that actually politicians do get to decide what you do with your body. It's their choice, not yours. Inject these powerful drugs whether you want to or not because we own you. Now, whatever else that is not a pro-choice position, to put it mildly. So as we watched this happen, we wondered, what are these people going to say the next time so-called abortion rights get challenged in court? And now we know the answer. Because last night, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled on a new abortion law in the state of Texas. That decision came down, by the way, 5-4. That's the exact split that decided Roe v. Wade almost 50 years ago. So it's good enough to have meaning. This time, the court upheld a Texas law that effectively bans abortion once a fetal heartbeat is detected. Typically, that's about 6 weeks into a pregnancy. Now, this new law does not allow the government of Texas to enforce the ban, so no one's going to jail over abortion. Instead, the new law lets citizens sue clinics that commit illegal abortions. So no matter how you feel about abortion, it's kind of hard to argue this is an especially radical law. Intentionally stopping a person's heart from beating is the definition of killing. Government has a right to regulate that. In fact, deciding when it's okay to kill a person is, on the most basic level, the whole reason to have laws in the first place. So whether it's right or wrong, or whether you like it or not, it's not a crazy statute. It did, however, drive the media crazy. Here's CBS, quote, news last night.
It is nearly impossible to get an abortion in Texas.
Miller runs 4 clinics providing abortion services and is one of the plaintiffs asking the Supreme Court to intervene.
It's heartbreaking to deny them the care that our staff are fully trained and ready to provide. So really, most people are going to be forced to carry a pregnancy against their will.
The law, signed by Republican Governor Greg Abbott, bans abortion once a so-called fetal heartbeat is detected, usually around 6 weeks.
How is an abortion service different from abortion? Why not just call it what it is? But here's the best line from CBS. A so-called fetal heartbeat. Imagine saying something like that out loud. Once they've decided you should die, they won't even admit you have a heartbeat. Do the very worst people in this country go into journalism, or does it just seem that way? Anyway, you'll notice that CBS does not make a case for abortion. No. They didn't tell you why it's so important to stop fetal hearts from beating. They just asserted that it is. What they didn't do is say a single word about how this violates your physical autonomy, about how it's your body, your choice. They can't say that now. They're for mandating vaccines and masks. So in that way, over at CBS, they're still a little bit smarter than the protesters you're seeing on your screen right now. These are the people who gathered outside the Texas state capitol in Austin today. You'll notice that many of them are holding signs affirming their physical autonomy. You can't tell them what to do with their bodies. Politicians, hands off my body. But wait a second. At the very same moment they're declaring their physical autonomy, they're wearing their little obedience masks. And you can bet money all of them are vaccinated. Why? Because they were told to get the shot. So, of course, they obeyed. They don't see the irony here. On the other hand, how could they see it? So few sane people are left with big platforms in this country that you almost never hear a sensible, logical, rational argument about anything. Just hours ago, for example, the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, released this statement, and we're quoting, "Far from compromising them, vaccine mandates actually further civil liberties." You have more civil liberties when they control your body. You can just imagine the 1860s version. Far from compromising civil liberties, slavery actually enhances personal freedom. It's not even Orwellian at this point. It's post-Orwell. This is Uncharted. Things are changing so fast that a lot of people on the left are having trouble keeping up with the shifting justifications for the policies they want. Poor Jen Psaki. Never a genius to begin with. Unintentionally blew herself up today at the White House press briefing. Watch this.
Why does the president support abortion when his own Catholic faith teaches abortion is morally wrong?
Well, he believes that it's a woman's right, it's a woman's body, and it's her choice.
Why does the president, who does he believe then should look out for the unborn child?
He believes that it's up to a woman to make those decisions, and up to a woman to make those decisions with her doctor. I know you've never faced those choices, nor have you ever been pregnant, but for women out there who have faced those choices, this is an incredibly difficult thing.
Ooh, getting the sophomore year gender studies lecture from Jen Psaki. Here at Wesley and Mr. Man, men don't get to talk about abortion. You ever been pregnant before? I don't think so. You can't get pregnant because you're a man. So abortion is a women's issue. Shut up. They've been saying that for so long they forgot to update the talking points. You'd think Jen Psaki, when she does this for a living, she should know that men get pregnant now. The science people tell us that every day. Men get pregnant. It's on the cover of magazines. I think it's on the cover of People magazine right now. A dude who's pregnant. Now, what does that mean? It means that abortion is now a men's issue. Men are child bearers. So men, dudes, have an equal right to choose to terminate their pregnancies. And they have a right to weigh in on the policy itself. It's not a women's issue anymore, Jen Psaki. She may get an outrage call from Congresswoman Cori Bush of St. Louis, who was on this early. Watch.
I sit before you today as a single mom, as a nurse, as an activist, and as a congresswoman, and I am committed to doing the absolute most to protect black mothers, to protect black babies, to protect black birthing people.
See, Cori Bush is on this. Maybe she should be White House press secretary. She knows it's not a woman's choice. It's a birthing people choice. So how is it an attack on women to ban abortion in Texas? Oh, that's a tough one. They're not really sure. So on MSNBC, they're not even trying to explain. They just want you to know that if you're for this law in Texas, you're the Taliban.
And we have a situation in Texas, right, where the American Taliban, because that's what it is, there's not an American evangelical right-wing movement, there is an American Taliban, is weirdly similar in so many ways to the Middle Eastern Islamist terrorists.
You just feel so sorry for these people. America is, again, changing so fast that, like, people over 16 who aren't on TikTok half the day just can't keep up. There was a time, like 2 weeks ago, when the Taliban were bad. Before they were a critical member of the international community who were talking daily with the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor and waiting for their American aid. The American Taliban? No, that's different. Unfortunately, unlike the Pashtun Taliban, no one in Texas is getting tens of billions in free weapons from Joe Biden. The National Right to Life isn't getting Blackhawks or 360,000 AR-15s. So it's a little different, actually, to be the American Taliban. But are the Taliban still bad? No, they're good. We need to update our talking points. But still, this MSNBC anchor, the most fiery in their lineup, wants you to know that if you tell people what to do with their bodies, you're a bad person unless you're Tony Fauci, in which case you're America's doctor and a hero. The whole thing, she said, reminds her of that book she once read, maybe the only book she's read. Listen.
By next summer, we could be living in our own version of The Handmaid's Tale, where forced birth is the law in large sections of the country. You know, and Senator Warren, you know, people think it's hyperbolic when I tweet about The Handmaid's Tale coming to America. But I don't think it seems hyperbolic now. Does it to you?
No.
It's like the greatest question ever asked. Elizabeth Warren, does this seem hyperbolic to you? Is there anything you can say to Elizabeth Warren where she might reply, Yeah, that seems hyperbolic to me. You're going too far there. Slow down a little bit. Rein in your rhetoric. But when MSNBC trots out Elizabeth Warren, it doesn't matter what she says. The point is she's there. This is a serious moment. CNN had to top it, and they did. They went farther even than MSNBC. To assess yesterday's court decision on abortion, CNN found a man with personal experience. That would be Jeffrey Toobin. Now, Toobin is most famous for masturbating on Zoom. That will define his obit, unfortunately. There may not be room for a much more relevant fact, which is Jeffrey Toobin once impregnated a coworker's daughter and then pressured her to get an abortion. So he knows this topic cold. Now, she refused. But in the process of pushing her to get an abortion unsuccessfully, Jeffrey Toobin learned what a lot of crappy men have learned over the years, which is this is a great option if you're a married guy who doesn't want to pay for more kids with random women. So Jeffrey Toobin means it when he tells you it's bad to ban it. Watch.
Today is the first day that a state could legally ban abortion. And Roe v. Wade essentially does not exist, at least in the state of Texas and probably more states to come. Texas has banned abortion in the state, and the Supreme Court has done nothing about it. That is immensely significant, mostly for the women of Texas. 29 million people in total live in Texas.
What does that mean for Roe v. Wade? I said it could effectively end Roe v. Wade. Was that an overstatement?
I don't think so. The point of Roe v. Wade is that states cannot ban abortion.
It's immensely significant for the women, he mansplains. They've been telling you that for a long time, when the truth is every person who lives here knows abortion is the best deal for the men who impregnate, say, the daughters of their coworkers, because it allows them to skate without having to deal with the consequences. Abortion makes actual women, the ones who until recently were having all the babies before dudes could get pregnant, it makes them feel pretty bad about it. If you ask women, how do you feel about the abortion yet? Not many feel that great about it at all. People like Jeffrey Toobin feel fine. So it's his prerogative he's defending, but whatever. There he is lecturing us about Roe v. Wade, the sacred 5-4 ruling that invented the right to abortion out of nothing. Now here you have a duly elected state legislature right now in 2021 contradicting the 5 unelected judges who concocted the right to abortion back in 1973. And Jeffrey Toobin is suggesting that's an attack on democracy. When elected people contravene the judgment of unelected people who died decades ago. That's what they're telling you. These people can't even hear themselves. But millions of normal Americans do recognize this moment for what it is. It's proof that democracy does still exist. Voters can decide what they want for their communities, their states, their towns, and that courts will at least potentially respect that right. It's called self-government. The legislature in Texas has realized this for months now. They've passed laws banning vaccine passports, homeless encampments, racist struggle sessions in schools, laws that block protests, that prevent emergency vehicles from riding down the road, et cetera, et cetera. Laws specific to Texas that the people of Texas want, and a lot of those laws are still on the books. So that's not a bad thing. How is that a bad thing? Why should Texas have to be exactly like California? The problem is, if that kind of thinking goes national, it gravely disempowers the people at CNN and the so-called civil rights organizations that think they're in control of everything. On the other hand, it might actually save civil rights for the rest of us, and that might be a good thing. Dana Lash is a nationally syndicated radio show host who we think lives in Texas. She joins us tonight. Thanks so much for coming on. The response to this, you got to kind of wonder, now that we've decided it's not your body and you don't get to choose what you do with it, politicians get to make that choice. What is the argument against this Texas law? A sincere question.
That's a great question. All I've heard is that I'm the American Taliban, and what I want to know is if I'm the American Taliban, we know that that's not true because I don't have a Black Hawk Tucker, and I think first, in order to have that classification, it doesn't count. No, I mean, 6 weeks up to the heartbeat, and I love how all of the people who for so long have said that the abortion, this is a sacred health care treatment, because, you know, health care treatment, I don't know what that phrase to describe abortion means either, but it's a sacred health care treatment between a woman and her doctor. doctor. However, Tucker, as you know, vaccines should be mandated to everybody by the government, and the government's going to stand in between you and your doctor. Everyone who has been screaming, my body, my choice, all of these years, who has been speaking out in favor of government-mandated vaccines, can all have 1 million seats right now, because this has all been a giant grift. These people don't care. They don't. It's a great day for babies in Texas. I'll just put it like that. This is a great day for babies in Texas, and I don't understand what all of these birthing persons were complaining about in Austin, because remember, gender is like a social construct, right? So they opened the door wide to this, Tucker, as you said, birthing persons.
They can't think clearly because they gave up all of their arguments. It's a woman's choice.
Yeah.
Your body is autonomous. Politicians don't have a right to make healthcare decisions. Across the country, politicians are punishing doctors, physicians, licensed physicians, for not taking medicine that licensed physicians don't want to take. I mean, that's happening everywhere. Maybe the only justification for abortion now is abortion itself. Maybe they just like abortion. Maybe it's that simple.
Well, at least that's what they're trying to argue it. I mean, it's evil. It ends a life. I don't know anything that ends a life that is called healthcare. That's called that's death. That's murder. That's killing. But to your point, you played, Tucker, a little bit earlier this audio from where you were talking about Jen Psaki when she was giving the White House press conference and she was lecturing this male reporter. Is that like the official White House policy now too? Is that only people that have had children can ask questions? Policy, but it also gets to the bigger point. Women and this third wave feminist stuff and this whole birthing persons and changing pronouns and all of that, they've done themselves a major disservice. Yeah. But yeah, Tucker, by the way, if you ever decide to get pregnant, I will throw your baby shower. Okay, your baby shower is on me in Texas. You can be a birthing person to be.
I'll do that as soon as you explain how exactly that works. I still don't know, and we cover this every day. Dan, it's great to see you tonight. Thank you for coming on. Appreciate it.
Good to see you. Thanks, Tucker.
Well, the Biden administration is currently allowing hundreds of thousands of foreign nationals to enter this country illegally from all over the world. We have no idea who most of these people are. It's possible we never will know. Illegal migrants routinely steal Social Security numbers to qualify for jobs, and no one in authority does a thing about this. When was the last time you heard the feds arrested a bunch of illegals for fake documents in a workplace raid? You don't hear it. It doesn't happen. It happens about as often as they check your ID at the polls in New York, which is to say just about never. So with that in mind, it was interesting to see this week's big announcement from the District Attorney of New York City, Cyrus Vance. Vance has just charged 13 Americans with felonies for buying fake vaccination cards. Several of the suspects, according to prosecutors, were healthcare workers who've been told by the state they'll be fired unless they get the shot. So politicians telling doctors and nurses what medicine to take. That's exactly what they told us they were against for decades. Again, these are healthcare workers. They know the science of COVID far better than politicians, governors, prosecutors. So in good conscience, they've risked their careers to preserve their right to bodily autonomy, and now they're in jail for that. Now, these arrests will be used to justify digital health passports for the entire American population. That is true. Save this tape. In fact, Cyrus Vance has already enlisted big tech to help root out the disobedient in New York. Quote, "We need companies like Facebook to take action to prevent the fraud happening on their platform," Vance said. "Making, selling, and purchasing forged vaccination cards are serious crimes with serious public safety consequences." End quote. Except that's a lie. Buying a fake vaccination card is not a, quote, serious crime. It's not even close to a serious crime. Buying a fake vaccination card is an act of desperation by decent, law-abiding Americans who have been forced into a corner by tyrants. You know what's a serious crime? Forcing Americans to take drugs they don't need or want. That's a very serious crime. And let's hope in the end someone is punished for it severely. The heart of it. It sounds like you care more than she does.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I may disagree with her. I do not want to get the vaccination. I don't feel that I am personally at my age and in my demographic in any trouble right now if I got COVID-19. I hope I don't get it, God forbid. But that's not an excuse for me to not pay attention to the rules and the policies and the procedures. I'm following the law. I'm being a good citizen. What she is doing is something entirely different. She's being a radical. She's being a leftist. And she is, in fact, an activist, not a healthcare worker.
Yeah, you can't get a COVID test, you can't have a credit card. I mean, this is getting really, really dark, and I just hope Republican members of Congress who still have some power would stand up for their voters. Candace Owens, I appreciate you coming on tonight. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, what's left of Hurricane Ida just slammed the Northeast. Some of the videos pretty over the top. You will never believe what America's meteorologist, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, says is responsible for this storm. We're going to take a break. We're going to give you some time to guess. We'll be right back. The remnants of Hurricane Ida moving north in the country slammed into the Northeast last night. Fox's Matt Finn has some amazing footage from what the storm did. Matt?
Tucker, some stunning weather videos from tornadoes and historic rainfall. First video of what appears to be a tornado near the Turnpike in Burlington, New Jersey. Also in the Garden State, a flooding house as a consistent, steady stream of water pours from 2 windows into this New Jersey basement. And inside the baggage room at Newark Liberty International Airport, more flooding and water bursting and bubbling from drains. In New York City, a gushing wall of water at this 7th Avenue subway stop flooding the tracks below. A historic high 3.15 inches of rain fell in 1 hour last night in New York City, shattering a record made just weeks ago. And more shocking video shows streets that look like rivers, dozens of cars flooded, some floating on Knickerbocker Avenue, Lower Manhattan. And in Bridgeport, Pennsylvania, this aerial video shows flooding that engulfed an entire neighborhood with water rescues on the upper floors of row homes. Tonight, Tucker, at least 45 deaths now being blamed on Hurricane Ida and its remnants. Tucker.
Amazing. Matt Finn, thank you for that.
Sure.
At least 45 deaths. Now, why did those people die? Well, Democrats in Congress know why they died. It turns out that their $1 trillion infrastructure bill, which could have prevented this storms and all human unhappiness, by the way, hasn't yet passed.
Global warming is upon us, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse unless we do something about it. And that's why it's so imperative to pass the 2 bills, the infrastructure bill and the budget reconciliation bill.
I am the Senate Majority Leader, and I will say literally anything. That is the message. Meanwhile, Sandy Cortez, who has a PhD, dissertation not yet complete, in saying absolutely anything, tweeted that a Green New Deal, her Green New Deal, would have prevented this storm and all storms and death itself. Over at CNN, the chief eunuch agreed.
You've got an environment here where there's 6 inches of rain that have fallen in my home in northern New Jersey, and it's an environment that is simply not able to keep up with that kind of moisture. You're going to hear a lot about climate change in the hours to come, and we should, because this is a climate change story.
When did that kid become a weatherman? Bring him back. Take his canoe away. What does the science actually say about ends? Have not yet voted for the infrastructure bill?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some pretty outrageous statements over the last 24 hours. I mean, look, what people have to understand is that floods are not just because of rain. It's also because we haven't done enough flood management. So we have had agreement. There is bipartisan agreement that we need to improve the infrastructure in New York to manage heavy rains. We did that in New Orleans, actually. After Hurricane Katrina, we did have power outages after Hurricane Ida hit. But the levees that they constructed after Hurricane Katrina held. The Army Corps of Engineers did a good job. We should have had a warning after Hurricane Sandy in New York. They did not do what they needed to do to prepare for this heavy rain. That's the cause of the flooding. We are going to see some more precipitation, some more rain in some parts of the world because of increasing temperatures. But you can't blame floods on climate change when we know the central factor is flood management. It's the same thing with forest fires, that we've told about forest management to prevent those high-intensity fires. It's not about modestly higher temperatures.
Has there ever been a time in history where a political party used the weather to indict the moral character of the other political party? That seems a little bit like witchcraft. I'm just throwing that out there.
It's definitely been a trend throughout human history to blame your political enemies for various weather events, and I think that is a pretty apt comparison right now. The irony is that Democrats are pushing for a huge investment in making our electricity even more dependent on the weather. So while the Democrats are talking a lot about extreme weather events, they're pushing for greater dependence on weather-dependent energy sources like solar panels manufactured in China, wind turbines, which depend on the wind. Those things we have seen make grids more vulnerable in California, in Texas, because when you put big money into those technologies, they just sit on top of the infrastructure that we have. They don't provide any additional resilience, and we end up underinvesting in the kind of weatherization that we need in order to survive these extreme weather events.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you really wanted to destroy your civilization, you low IQ political extremists in charge of your power grid. Let's hope we don't do that. That's my hope. Anyway, Michael Schellenberger, I appreciate your coming on. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you might remember that not very well covered incident at the Wee Spa in Los Angeles not too long ago, when an actual woman objected to the presence of a biological man in the female section of the spa, wagging his junk around. But he's a woman. Well, there's just been a major development in that case. We'll tell you what it is straight ahead. I'm planning, by the way, to bring you a brand new website this fall, newtuckercarlson.com. Before we do, come in and confronted the staff at the Wee Spa in Los Angeles back in June. Now, there was one woman using the spa that day that hadn't been told that in America you're required to lie about everything. This woman thought you could just kind of report what you see. You could tell obvious truths. So she reported that there was a dude, a biological man, clearly biologically male, wandered around the women's section of the spa with his junk hanging out, and the spa wouldn't do anything about it. Here was the exchange.
It's okay for a man to go into the women's section, show his penis around the other women, young little girls underage. Your spa, Wee Spa, condone that. Is that what you're saying? Like I asked. It's so he could stay there. He could stay there? What sexual orientation? I see a it lets me know he's a man. He's a man. He is a man. He is not no female. He is not a female, sweetie. Okay, girls down there, other women who are highly offended for what they just saw. And you did nothing. Absolutely nothing. In fact, you sided with him.
Now, we don't know the identity of the woman whose voice you heard. We very much like to hire her. There being a shortage in America right now of people who say obvious things and then stick with it. Over at Slate, their entirely non-binary staff was deeply offended by this. They call the video you just saw a, quote, transphobic hoax. But journalist Andy No, who tells the truth under all circumstances, is reporting that, quote, 4 women and a minor girl all came forward to allege that a man called Darren G. Marriager was partially erect, sorry to repeat this, in the women's section of the Wee Spa. So it turns out on Monday, charges of indecent exposure were discreetly filed against this guy. He's also facing felony charges for indecent exposure in a separate incident. So this was time. You will not be surprised to learn. Andy No broke this story. He joins us tonight. Andy, thanks so much for coming on. So it turns out it wasn't a transphobic hoax. It was totally real, correct?
That's right. From the beginning, the establishment press was echoing the messages from the radical trans activists, which was trying